Hi, welcome back to Fresh Faces, New Ideas. My name is David. If you like the channel and would like to support me, please like and subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. Now, we're going to go over Tucker Carlson statement he had, I think it was last night, because when I pulled up the whole video, because I wanted to see if there was more to it, it didn't come up, but I found the actual clip. So I'm pretty sure this was last night, but this has been a relatively recent one. It's 12 minutes long, and he's talking about Canada's COVID restriction. He goes into some other stuff. There's a lot in here, and it is worth remembering, and I'm going to repeat this every single time I bring up Tucker Carlson. His court, when he was sued for lying, his defense was, no reasonable person can come to my show without realizing that I'm lying. You can't come to my show without understanding that I'm not going to give you the facts. Just what it is. John Oliver, I'll repeat this every single time, did a fantastic piece. He is a very dangerous man, Tucker Carlson. He spouts white nationalists, white supremacy, just general misinformation, talking points. And remember, the last video I did on him, their argument was, we're going to be authoritarian now because the left made us authoritarian. So that's where he's coming from. So we're going to watch this video. We're going to go over it, and we're going to see how dangerous this guy is and how wrong he is. He's going to say a lot of things that are very wrong.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Joe Biden went to Pittsburgh today. Maybe you saw it. He announced his administration has decided to guarantee economy-destroying, crippling hyperinflation.
No, that is not anything that was in that bill. I don't even understand where the hyperinflation comes from. I went over that bill. I will link that in this video. But no, there's nothing on hyperinflation. In fact, it would create millions of new jobs. If you're worried, the real thing he's worried about is he might have to pay more taxes, because it's worth remembering, although Tucker Carlson tries to make it believe that he is one of you, he is the heir to the Swanson food family fortune and a multi-million-dollar television personality that is the largest audience in the history of the world.
By funding yet another multi-trillion-dollar spending bill. Biden claimed this batch of newly printed money will go to, quote, infrastructure.
It's not even newly printed money. He's doing it through taxes. This won't be paid for by taxes.
You're thinking sparkling new bridges and roads and airports.
It does all of those things. That's literally in the bill. That was the first thing I covered in the bill, I believe, was the roads and the bridges.
That's funny. No, it doesn't mean that. Biden has a different kind of, quote, infrastructure in mind, the kind that will definitely not improve your life. We're taking a close look at that plan tonight, and we will have details for you tomorrow.
I'm gonna have to find this for tomorrow for the live stream. Because there's no way he's gonna be obvious or not lie about this. It's just in that statement, everything he said was false there. Just everything he said about that the bill was a lie. It was.
But first tonight, what if your next door neighbor suddenly went dangerously insane and started holding people hostage in his house? Would you consider that threatening? Would you even notice it? Those are not theoretical questions. Something very much like that just happened in our national neighborhood. Canada, the landmass directly to our north, our single largest trading partner, the country with...
First off, to his hypothetical, before he gets into talking about Canada, I have no idea. I don't really pay attention to my neighbors. So there's a movie about this, about if your neighbor starts kidnapping people. It's just a weird hypothetical.
We share the longest international border in the world. Canada took a dramatic move toward legitimately dangerous authoritarianism.
Now, legitimately dangerous authoritarian. Keep in mind, just last week, Tucker Carlson was saying the Republican Party is going to pick an authoritarianism, and we have no choice. It's just going to happen because that's what it is. We're just, the left is free to do whatever they want. Republicans are just the most persecuted people ever. So we have to be authoritarian now. But this is dangerous authoritarian. But if we're authoritarian, that's fine.
In Canada, yes. Here's just one measure of it.
Also, look at this fucking picture. Like, yeah, Justin Trudeau is... Look, I don't have a huge amount of love for Justin Trudeau. He has not done a great job. He is not a great prime minister. Was he certainly better than Trump? Absolutely. But he has done some wacky, dumb things. And Canada has its own set of problems.
Monday, the country's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, outlined his government's new corona regulations. Canadians hoping to return to their country must be tested before and after takeoff, he said. Quote, if your test results come back positive, you'll need to immediately quarantine in designated government facilities. This is not optional.
Now, pause. He's going to make a big deal out of this, but this is not the only country that does this. You type in designated facilities for quarantine in Hong Kong, Canada. Vancouver is also in Canada. I don't even know where this is. Mumbai, South Africa. Look at all of these places. Holy cow. And if you look in places like Singapore, they actually have a mandatory quarantine. When you go into Singapore, they put you in a hotel for 10 days, and they give you a phone and they track you because you're not supposed to leave. And you're required to go there. Like, this is not optional. When you go to these places, you have to deal with this. And the reason for it is, if you quarantine people to make sure they're not sick, and you quarantine them for 10 to 14 days, depending on whether or not they get sick or not, you make sure that they can't come in and spread the virus.
Designated government facilities. Now, when this happens in other countries, and it does, we call those facilities internment camps.
Kind of. It depends on what they actually are. What China's doing to the Uyghurs is internment camps. This is not an internment camp. This is actually a proven method to stop the spread of coronavirus, and other countries have implemented it. Now, he's going to go into this more, and there's certainly things Canada has definitely messed up on with this. But he has to fearmonger about it first.
But because this is Canada we're talking about, a place we assume is passive and polite and Anglo to the point of parody, no one thinks to use that term. In fact, no one thinks about it at all. Trudeau's in...
Because this isn't new. Yes, it is new in Canada. They just implemented this at the end of February, was when it took place. But this isn't a new idea. Other countries have implemented this.
Internment policy has been in place since last month. And as far as we can tell, no major U.S. network has even mentioned it. And neither has our State Department, which ordinarily seems to exist to make unhappy...
I'm going to have to actually talk about our State Department, because our State Department has some issues with some of the countries they're arguing with within Bolivia. That's something I'm going to have to cover tomorrow in the live stream.
Noises about human rights violations around the world, but not a word about Canada. Preconceptions may play some role here. We assume that interning people is what Russia does. Boring people is what Canada does. But not anymore. Suddenly, Canada is a flagrant violator of the most basic human rights.
So this is not... Yes, they are saying that you have to stay at these places, but it's more complicated than what he's saying. So you have to, when you come into Canada, and this is their government website, you have to give them this plan whether or not you're actually coming to a place. So you can figure out how to go to your own hotel, and they have ways to get you to your own hotel. And then if not, you will go to one of these hotels. So he's calling them quarantine government facilities, but they're actually hotels. Are they the greatest hotels? No, but he will go over that, and I actually do agree with him because I have looked into this. It's going to take longer to get through the airport, and you do actually have to go to these hotels. So yes, it is a right that you have to travel, but because it's a health emergency, there are certain things that will change how you travel, and this happens in other countries as well.
Fail a COVID test, and they will lock you up without trial. And go ahead and
lock you up without trial. Now that is crazy. Hold on, I think he's
try to disobey. According to the Canadian government,
I'm going to back this up for a second.
Fail a COVID test, and they will lock you up without trial. And go ahead
in a hotel until you are cleared of a disease that is spreading and is still a pandemic. They're not going to throw you in jail. You fail the test, they have to quarantine you. They have to quarantine you either way. But if you fail the test, you're just quarantined longer. You're not thrown into jail.
And try to disobey. According to the Canadian government, anyone who attempts to avoid these rules, detention in a government internment facility, for example, could face $1 million fine and 3 years in prison.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, so if you try to evade their laws, so this is their passport laws. This is what it requires to get into their country. Now, if we just had people ignoring those rules here, people like Tucker Carlson would say, well, you can't come in because you're not following our rules. That's what's happening there. If you try to evade you're illegally going into their country then. They have these rules in order to protect the citizens of their country. So Tucker Carlson is advocating for illegal entry to break the rules into Canada.
This is Justin Trudeau's Canada.
Once again, really stupid looking picture of Justin Trudeau, and that's on purpose.
It's funny, Trudeau always seemed like a cheerful idiot, wearing weird costumes and yammering on about diversity. Who knew he was...
Yammering on about diversity. That's a fucking line. Because, you know, to Tucker, diversity is a bad thing. He's had multiple segments talking about how immigrants are bad. He's also had multiple segments about how they're coming to a country that's too populated while we simultaneously have a country that's not populated enough.
Mussolini. There might be a lesson here for other nations that are led by shallow neoliberal empty suits. Know any?
Okay, so here's the other thing. I know at some point you're going to say this. Neoliberalism is a problem. It has generally failed. We saw the ultimate failure of neoliberalism when it went against Trump and it lost in Hillary Clinton. I'm not a neoliberalist. So Biden is more neoliberal than he is progressive in other things, but he has to push some progressive policies.
All the chirpy identity politics talk, it's not a joke. It's internment cells. In Canada, where everything has a euphemism, those cells are referred to as approved quarantine hotels.
That's what they are. They actually are hotels. They are really shitty hotels. This is very similar to the Biden border thing. They did not do a good job of preparing for this. And how they didn't do a good job preparing for this a year into this is just mind-boggling. If you were going to set this up at the beginning, if we were talking a year ago when the pandemic was first starting and they were trying to do this last March, and they had the type of conditions he's going to explain, because I've looked into this to make sure that to see how much of what he was lying about, that would be different. I don't understand how they screwed this up so badly.
Like? Well, as noted, they're internment cells. What do you think they're like? There are shortages of food and water. You could be sexually assaulted as you're held in.
Yes. However, what he's saying here is also misleading. So I looked into this. So they are very bad. Like the food and the water and the privacy in these hotels is pretty dismal. It does not appear to be like we're not talking about 5-star hotels. They just did a bad job setting this. Now, for the sexual assault thing, so far there have been 2 cases. One of them was at one of these hotels where a different person broke into somebody else's room and sexually assaulted her. That person was arrested. The other one was they have these trained guards. So they're because people go home. If you could have a place you can go home, they send people to your houses to check on you, make sure you're there, and then they ask you questions. And he tried to sexually assault a woman as well. So there was only those 2 cases, and one of them wasn't even at one of these facilities. And in response to that, they arrested that guy too, and then they changed how their rules were to mandate more training for these people. However, the people who are going to your houses don't have the right to fine you. They don't have the right to arrest you. They're just there to make sure you're following quarantine. So while he says, ooh, sexual assault, and sexual assault is bad, it's 2 cases. So far, I think there have been 500 plus people who've been quarantined like this. And only one of them was at this place. And let's be clear, it is mostly because they're kind of in shitty hotels.
Listen to a member of the Canadian Parliament explain what they're like.
The Liberals instituted a federal hotel quarantine requirement for those entering Canada.
Hotel quarantine, I thought it was an internment camp. You see, it's kind of weird that in their country, they don't even call it internment camps, but Tucker does.
We have heard reports that it is taking hours to get through to book these hotels.
Yeah, I imagine it takes a while, but it takes hours to book hotels elsewhere too.
Dietary restrictions are not being met, and food and water is not always readily available. That's in addition to this program continuing after reports of sexual assault. This is mind-boggling.
Look, I'm going to say this over again. They did a really bad job setting these hotels up. It does not look like they have any set of like actual good dietary restrictions and making sure people have enough food. It looks like they planned this really, really poorly. And again, it is not, I'm not here to defend Canada. They definitely screwed some of this up. I also don't understand how you screwed this up a year into this. And it's just mind-boggling.
Oh, the liberals did this. It's not very liberal to intern people, is it? According to a report in the Post-Millennial, the doors in many of the internment facilities don't lock. Detainees have no way to protect themselves while they sleep, hence the sexual assault.
Yeah, the one case of sexual assault.
They don't have access to adequate medical care. In one case, Canadian authorities detained a man with diabetes called Ray Truesdale. What was Truesdale's crime? Well, it was flying from Tennessee to Toronto on a business trip.
This is not a crime. Let's be clear. I've already showed it to you. In their law, this is a law that they passed because of the powers that have expanded during a health crisis. You have to register what you're doing. And if you don't, you have to take a test and you go to one of these facilities. You can get a different facility. You can register to go to a different hotel. This man was not kidnapped and thrown into a shitty hotel. Well, he was put in a shitty hotel because that's what these places are. They are shitty hotels. But it's not, he didn't commit a crime. These are the rules that are there. This is from the type of people who are saying, oh, you got to come here legally. You got to follow our laws. This is their law.
As he waited in confinement for his corona test results, his jailers forgot to feed Truesdale for more than 24 hours. Ultimately, Truesdale left his cell and went downstairs in search of something to eat. And there he found others who were being held without food. They were screaming, he said. In the end, Canadian authorities informed Truesdale that his coronavirus sample had been damaged somehow, so he had to remain in internment. Or consider...
Look, I've even looked into this. I could not find that story. I believe that it happens. I absolutely believe they lost this guy's thing. And like I've repeated like 4 or 5 times, they really fucked up how they set these things up.
Bolu, a Canadian who landed in Calgary after a business trip to Florida. He told Canadian television that the experience was very much like a kidnapping. He was put, quote, in a black van with tinted windows and taken to an undisclosed location. Where am I going, he asked. Why am I going there? The response, we'll tell you everything when you get there. He thought it was a prank. He thought it had to be, but it wasn't a prank. Quote, I got out there and there was plastic all over, people walking around in hazmat suits. It was like jail, pretty much.
Look, hazmat suits are definitely overblown, although the guy is coming from Florida. So they're, it's a little less insane, but also like he's over-exaggerating how bad this is. And once again, it is not jail. It's their law, and these are just shitty hotels.
Yeah, just don't call it jail. And that's an order directly from Canadian state media. This fall, the CBC, Canadian state media, ran a story with this headline. Prime Minister health officials warn Canadians against believing COVID-19 internment camps.
Which is what Tucker is currently doing. COVID internment camp disinformation. These are not internment camps. Internment camps are what we currently have at the border. They happened under the Trump administration. They're currently happening under the Biden administration. These are not internment camps. They're just really shitty hotels.
Disinformation. Warn them against believing. Sound familiar? That claim, that conspiracy theory, said CBC, that the federal government is preparing to forcibly intern Canadians is patently false. The CBC assured Canadians the government was preparing, quote, voluntary quarantine sites.
It has, though. There are other hotels that are voluntary quarantine sites. You can go to other places. You only end up in these particular shitty ones is if you don't prepare ahead. Although, on the other hand, I think they also have to pay for the better ones. So, like, if you go into an actual hotel, you have to actually pay for it. That's covered by you. So I think if they're going to argue that you can go to these other places, the Canadian government should cover it.
Yeah, voluntary in the sense of being mandatory, which is what they are. They're mandatory. And by the way, as a matter of science, how does packing infected people into crowded internment facilities
There is no proof that they're packed into infected. They're packed into these facilities. It appears that everyone at least has their own room.
The spread of the coronavirus? That's a good question, and some have asked the Canadian government that very question, but they haven't explained. We do know, and this is significant, that Canada has fallen far behind other advanced nations in distributing the vaccine, which is interesting given the decades of propaganda all of us here have been subjected to about the glories of the Canadian healthcare system.
Okay, so he's conflating two separate things. they have done a really bad job with their vaccine rollout. The Rational National, David Dole, has a really good video on that. That's because they don't produce the vaccines in Canada, and they just thought they'd be able to buy it. So they did a really bad job in it. It has nothing to do with their healthcare system. If you want to talk about their healthcare system, let's see how many Canadians lost. How many Canadians lost healthcare during the pandemic? Let's see if there's an image. What is this? This is this. Okay. Anyway, we're the only country in the world where people have lost healthcare because of this pandemic, because they lost their jobs, because we tie our healthcare to their jobs.
According to Andrea Taylor, who researches this at Duke, Canada, quote, had more faith in the global supply chain than other countries. Oh,
and that's what I just talked about. They were not prepared because they don't have the facilities to build to produce the vaccine. Also, this goes back into something else I've been talking about a lot, is you have to remove the patent so that other countries that have the ability to produce the vaccine can actually produce it and not have to pay for it so they can get cured.
Believed it worked. The globalism thing, that turned out to be a big mistake. But rather than admit that globalist stupidity is why they can't get vaccines to their population, Justin Trudeau has decided to punish his own citizens. It's his fault, and the population gets punished. Do you recognize that impulse? Does it look familiar to you? It should, because neoliberalism is always the same, no matter where you find it. What's so interesting is that Canada's new rules apply only to COVID.
And now we're going to, it's a fearmonger about brown people.
Patients. Other transmissible diseases are exempt. People with AIDS aren't being sent to a term.
Hold on. I read the headline before I heard him speak. Let's roll that back, because he's going to say something that's probably a pretty common talking point, and it's also incredibly stupid.
Do you recognize that impulse? Does it look familiar to you? It should, because neoliberalism is always the same, no matter where you find it. What's so interesting is that Canada's new rules apply only to COVID patients. Other transmissible diseases.
COVID patients instead of other transmissible diseases, what he just said. Because as we currently know, we are currently facing a flu pandemic. No, we're facing a COVID pandemic. And these are specifically to deal with COVID. Well, so let's see what other diseases this doesn't cover.
Diseases are exempt. People with AIDS aren't being sent to.
AIDS! You know, the disease that you get from having sex with people or swapping spit. Unlike COVID, where if I have COVID and I breathe on you, you get COVID. And that the AIDS is cured by staying away from people for 2 weeks. Unlike COVID. Fucking idiot.
Facilities, thank God. No one's tried that since Fidel Castro did it in the 1980s. Drug-resistant tuberculosis is fine too. That's a real problem, but not in Canada. Only COVID, a disease with a 98% survival rate. Weird.
Yes, it has a higher survival rate, and even I'm not sure that's totally accurate what the number is. However, there are long-lasting, possibly lifelong effects from even if you recover from COVID. It does a number on your lungs. There's potential brain damage. It is a long. So just because you don't die doesn't mean you didn't have a debilitating disease. And once again, although I'm not entirely sure how tuberculosis spreads, this is specifically to deal with just COVID.
Too, and you may recognize this as well. At the same moment they're clamping down on travel by their own citizens, the Canadian government has announced plans to admit 400,000 new permanent residents from other countries over the next 8 months.
Over the next 8 months. So I imagine they're going to have some type of system to make sure they're COVID free. They're not just going to let them wander into the country. Actually, you know what? If I cared enough about the actual Canadian specifics to go in to look into that, I would, but I guarantee you whatever he's saying is probably either hyperbole or straight out lies.
By the way, that number will increase substantially over the next couple of years.
Based on what? Immigration is not a bad thing, you schmuck.
None of those people, those immigrants from the third world, will be forcibly quarantined in Canada. We're not calling for them to be, but it's interesting.
Yes, he is. That's exactly what he was calling for. Hold on, I want to pull it back because I don't remember what he said what they were said from.
AIDS aren't being sent to internment facilities, thank God. No one's tried that since Fidel Castro did it in the 1980s. Drug-resistant tuberculosis is fine too. That's a real problem, but not in Canada. Only COVID, a disease with a 98% survival rate. Weirdly, too, and you may recognize this as well, at the same moment they're clamping down on travel by their own citizens, the Canadian government has announced plans to admit 400,000 new permanent residents from other countries over the next 8 months. And
Okay, other countries. At no point did he say they were third world countries. They could be from U.S. Well, if you, I think it was Norway or Sweden just considered us underdeveloped. So there's that.
Number will increase substantially over the next couple of years. None of those people, those immigrants from the third world, will be forcibly quarantined in Canada.
Prove it. There's no proof that you said that they're coming from the third world. There's no proof that they're going to not be tested. Prove it. If you're making a claim like this, prove it.
We're not calling for them.
You absolutely are.
It's interesting, the difference. They won't be arrested. In fact, they'll be rewarded because they're
You're not being arrested unless you try to actively avoid their laws.
not citizens. Only the citizens are punished. Back in November, Justin Trudeau admitted what's going on here. It's not about coronavirus, stopping the virus, saving lives. No. This pandemic, he said, is an opportunity to permanently change Western civilization.
Pause. That's his statement. The statement he just attributed to Justin Trudeau is, we are going to permanently change Western civilization. He's about to show us a clip. Let's see where Justin Trudeau says this is going to permanently change Western civilization. That is the bar that Tucker set. This is the same thing with Ben Shapiro when Ben Shapiro had videos and he set a bar for something, and then the clip he showed demonstrably showed he was wrong.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
Holy fuck. Did you hear that? This is going to change Western civilization by allowing the economy to be reimagined so it deals with poverty and climate change and inequality. Those are things Tucker complains about, or at least the inequality part when he's pretending to be a populist. But it's not what he said. And it's not what you said he said either. That's more fear-mongering.
The Great Reset. And we don't want to give Justin Trudeau too much credit. He may be sinister, but he's not smart. It's not like he thought that phrase up. No, he took it from his role models in this country. At a forum hosted by the World Economic Forum in mid-November, John Kerry, our new climate czar, laid it out. Yes, he said, the Great Reset will happen. And I think it will happen with greater speed and with greater intensity than a lot of people might imagine. In effect, the citizens of the United States have just done a great reset. We've done a great reset, and it was a record level of voting. We're at the dawn of an extremely
Yeah, look, I don't know the exact context of this particular quote, but we just did hit record letters of voting. That just happened. So look, because I don't know the context, I can't entirely say that he's lying or that he's not misconstrued this, but he absolutely has misconstrued this for what he was trying to fearmonger. Because let's remember, he started this part of his segment off saying that this would change how Western culture is.
exciting time. Has it been extremely exciting for you? Has it been extremely exciting for most Americans as the people in charge mismanage this country all the way to the
People in charge mismanaged the country during this pandemic. This pandemic has been going on for a year, which would have started in 2020. Now, I don't know about you, but the person in charge in 2020, it wasn't Joe Biden. It wasn't Hillary Clinton. It wasn't Barack Obama. It was Donald Trump. So who are you saying mismanaged this pandemic, Tucker? Is it Joe Biden, who had no power as a private citizen? Or was it the guy you advocate for constantly?
brink? No, it probably hasn't been. It's been a sad time for most people. But for power-mad leaders hoping to eliminate centuries of constitutional restraints on their own ambitions, it is indeed an exciting time.
None of the things that were shown in either of those clips advocated for the removal of constitutional limits on their own power. Holy hell, that is a stretch.
Could what is happening in Canada happen here? That's the question. That's the whole point of this segment. You might not think so. We don't need internment cells here because, unlike Canada, we have the vaccine and we're distributing it to tens of millions of people. And once you're
that's actually true. Look, once again, they're not internment cells, but yet by having the vaccine and giving it to people, we are advocating that we don't need to put these restrictions on. We may ultimately have these restrictions, whether they're flight restrictions coming in for people who are coming in, or whether they need some type of vaccine passport. Then we wouldn't have to do this type of restriction. But also another factor to help that would be by having more people be vaccinated. So one way to do that would be to remove the patent so that other countries can produce them. Now, some countries, like Canada, are incapable of producing it. So they're kind of screwed for a little while until the countries that are able to produce it can make sure that their own people are taken care of.
Vaccinated, you can live normally. That's the whole point of getting vaccinated. But then you wonder, if that's true, why are Joe Biden and Kamala Harris still wearing their silly little obedience masks every
Fucking A. We're still on masks, man. Come on, just wear the fucking mask. It's not a big deal. It's not a sign of obedience. People in China were wearing masks from other diseases well before this. This is not like being against masks is so stupid.
where they go. They've been vaccinated, so is everyone around them. So why the masks? Why the restrictions? What exactly is going on here? We know it's not science. We know that for certain. According to the CDC, once you are vaccinated, of course, you don't need a mask anymore.
No, that is not true. I covered this in the CDC guidelines. I think it was in a live stream. This is the CDC guidelines. If you are vaccinated, this is when you cannot wear a mask. When you were in an indoor with fully vaccinated people without wearing a mask, you can gather indoors with unvaccinated people from one other household for relatives, unless they are people who have an increase of illness. So, just because you are vaccinated does not mean you can walk around and without a mask. They still advocate for, you should still advocate for wearing a mask. You should stay protected as much as, like wearing a mask, staying at least 6 feet apart from other, and avoiding crowds and poorly ventilated spaces. This is on the CDC website. This has been here for over a month, Tucker, so you're just now blatantly lying and you're still scaring people about wearing a mask. Look, I don't understand people. Just put on a goddamn mask. It's not that hard.
We can kind of almost see the end. We're vaccinating so very fast. Our data from the CDC today suggests, that vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick, and that it's.
So before he goes into this, there was actually just a report that I think 3 people who had vaccines got COVID. Now, part of this is going to happen because I think we're going to need multiple booster shots for this vaccine. But that's because there's variants. So the variants are going to change how things happen.
Not just in the clinical trials, but it's also in real world data.
Well, we hope vaccinated people don't carry the virus. Otherwise, why are we getting all these vaccines? What's the point?
That's actually not even true. Is it in this? Or one of the things I saw is you can still carry the virus with the vaccine. It's just non-transmissible.
Turns out the real world data confirms common sense. Once you get the vaccine, you don't need a mask.
No, it does not say that.
Biden employee. So why is everyone still wearing it? Why are people with vaccinations walking alone outside with masks on? Why are Joe Biden and Kamala Harris wearing masks?
Science.
Sincere question. You'd think our media would ask that once in a
No, because you're an idiot. Science.
while, but they're not. They're asking very different questions in the other direction. In fact, they're heckling members of the opposition political party, people who've been vaccinated, and demanding that despite the vaccination, they put their masks back on.
Putting a mask on for us?
Yeah, when I'm talking to the TV camera, I'm not going to wear a mask, and all of us have been immunized, so.
It'd make us feel better.
So, to be fair to Ted Cruz, which is a crazy statement in itself because Ted Cruz is a jackass, this is kind of a dick thing to do because they don't ask the press secretary Jen to wear a mask while she's doing the briefing. So I look, I get it. I generally think when they do these type of things, if they've been vaccinated, they don't wear a mask. He probably should be wearing a mask anyway, but that's not going to happen because he's Ted Cruz. But this is a stupid question.
You're welcome to step away if you like. The whole point of a vaccine, CDC guidance, is what we're following.
The whole point of the vaccine, as if we needed to be reminded. We do, because we've lost sight of that. That's what the science says. But nobody cares what the science says. Wear your obedience mask immediately.
It's not an obedience mask, and the science still proves you're an idiot.
Feel better, which is the passive-aggressive way of saying, do it or else.
No, it's not. That you say, hey, man, like, it would make us feel better. That's just, I mean, it's like when you have the stove on and you walk away for a minute. You say, hey, can you watch this and make me feel better?
Now, watching that does make you wonder, how would our media react here in the United States if Dr. Fauci one day reluctantly concluded that actually we need coronavirus internment facilities in this country? Obviously.
Now, hold on. I actually want to check this. COVID restrictions. Oh, hold on. It looks like Hawaii actually has a 10-day mandatory quarantine. So we do kind of have these determined camps, Tucker, and in our own country, and you don't even know it. Now, part of this is good because Hawaii is one of the states that have the lowest COVID cases and deaths. So, I mean, you're an idiot. More.
For our safety, we don't want to violate anyone's rights, but we got to have them. Sorry. How would our media respond? We should look. I'm going to be very clear about this. The vaccine should be mandated for every single person who is not sick to it or pregnant until they figure out whether it's safe for pregnant women. That's end of story. We want to get rid of this, make it mandated. Look at the clip we just played again. Look it up on the internet. You see that reporter and you realize that person badly wants Ted Cruz tossed into the back of a black van for coronavirus noncompliance.
That's what he took from that clip. Let's watch this clip again. Let me pull it back up. Now, keep in mind, the statement he just said was that person asking Ted Cruz to put a mask on wants to black bag and send him to a concentration camp.
Putting a mask on for us?
Yeah, when I'm talking to the TV camera, I'm not going to wear a mask, and all of us have been immunized, so.
How do you make us feel better?
You're welcome to step away if you like.
How would
Wow. You could just feel that person wanting to throw him in the back of a car. This is crazy.
our media respond? Take a look at the clip we just played again. Look it up on the internet. You see that reporter and you realize that person badly wants Ted Cruz tossed into the back of a black van for coronavirus noncompliance. Hauled away. And not just Ted Cruz, but you too.
No, he's just fear-mongering. Listen, Tucker Carlson...
all the disobedient, politically inconvenient...
All right, hold on. I have no idea how long this has been going on. Look, I'm going to wrap this up really quick. Almost everything he said there was a lie. Yeah, Canada has their own type of borders where you have to get tested in order to get into Canada. You have to get tested, and then they quarantine you. And you can be quarantined in another hotel if you choose to be there. Otherwise, you go to these particular facilities they built. These facilities are not good. Let's be very clear. They fucked this up. They've not done a good job of getting people food. They've not done a good job of making sure people are fine in these facilities. Absolutely a problem. And if that had been the story, I probably wouldn't have covered it. It's the fact that he's trying to fearmonger over these things. Once again, it is always, always, always worth remembering with Tucker that nothing you can't go in there believing he's going to tell you the truth. And there he didn't. He lied about the Canadian thing. He lied about the infrastructure bill, even though he only talked about it for a minute. He lied about masks. Look, the CDC guidelines have not changed. Get vaccinated, you still have to wear masks, unless you're with other unvaccinated people. And he fear-mongered, saying, look, you know, what if they come for you because you don't want to wear a mask? The reporters want to get rid of Ted Cruz. None of that was true. It is always worth remembering that Tucker Carlson is one of the most watched people in the history of the country. And he's out here fear-mongering over and over again. He's an idiot, and he scares people, and that is his brand. Now, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter @FacesIdeas, and I will see you in the next one.